So welcome, everyone, and thank you for coming. My name is Peg Bolano, and I'm the president of the Portland Area League of Women Voters, and I live in Falmouth. Thank you to Judy Clark and the Merrill Memorial Library for inviting the League here to participate in this government workshop event. We'll be providing an overview of Maine's somewhat unique election process. Before I introduce our speaker, I'd like to tell you just a little bit about the League of Women Voters of Maine. As most of you know, it's been 104 years since women won the right to vote. And what you may not know is the League of Women Voters US and the League of Women Voters of Maine are both 104 years old as well. The League of Women Voters of Maine has 5 local chapters: Bangor, the Highlands Regional, which is up in Piscataqua, Midcoast, Down East, and the Portland Area League. The Portland Area League covers from Brunswick to Kittery and has 177 members. By joining the league, members belong to the local league, the state league, and the national league. An important perspective to read to you during a divided election year, and this is the reason why many of us enjoy working with the league. Quote, "The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization that encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. The League does not endorse any political party for any elective office." I'd now like to introduce you to our presenter, Melissa Murphy, who is a member of the League of Women Voters Board of Directors. She lives in Scarborough and has been a member of the League for 40 years. Melissa.
I know I don't look that old. So thank you, Peg. So I guess next slide, please. As Peg mentioned, we are here to provide a brief outline of Maine's election processes with a focus on voting rights. Let me start by saying I am not an expert by any means. In my former life, I was a lawyer, but voting rights was not a specialty by any stretch. I'm just a very involved volunteer. And so I don't profess to be an expert, but I do encourage questions, and I will answer them as I can, or Peg can also jump in. You probably know that Maine is a leader in voter turnout within the country. So how did we get to this point? I'll tell you, it's not an accident. A lot of hard work by volunteers, policymakers, legislators, and local officials has gotten us to this point. Before we get to that, though, it's important to understand how our elections are administered. Local involvement probably helps to make voters comfortable and confident with the process. I don't know if you saw the article, coincidentally, in this morning's paper about hand counting of ballots in some small towns. I thought that was very interesting and timely. And one of the things I read in the article, which I know from family members in other parts of the country, is that a lot of times voting is handled at the county-wide. Usually it's county-wide, not local, as handled by local officials as it is here in Maine. So I think that is one of the things that helps with voter turnout. People are comfortable with the people who are administering the elections. They probably even know them in many cases. So I think that contributes to voter confidence and high voter turnout. And that the local administration of election is a piece of overall government in Maine. And what is unusual about Maine government, and one of the things that is unusual about it is that we are, believe it or not, the second most rural state in America. And the way that is defined is that the amount or the percentage of the population that lives in urban areas. So there are a multitude of small towns. I'll tell you, that was one of the things that struck me when I first moved here 45 or so years ago. Was I came from a state, Midwestern state, with big cities, and I was like, what do you mean every little town has its own local government, its own school department, etc. So that leads to diffuse government, but it also leads to people being, as I said, familiar with their local government. And this is supported by what is called the home rule approach to government, and which Maine has adopted. And that means that every municipality can govern as it wants to, as long as it does not violate state law or the state constitution, or federal law or the or the federal constitution. So your local government has a lot of input into how things are done in your locality, including the administration of elections. In Maine, the administration of elections is split between the state government, the Secretary of State's office, and local officials. And the League of Women Voters has a guide to local government, which is very, very thorough and expansive if you'd like to learn more about the delegation of authority between state and local government. And I've got to tell you, I don't fully understand, Beck, if you want to go to the next slide, I don't fully understand the role of the Secretary of State, to tell you the truth, because it seems like everything's done at the local level. But the Secretary of State is responsible for the supervision and administration of all elections in Maine, for preparing ballots and tabulating official state results and local results as well. And I guess the biggest function, from my perspective, that the Secretary of State serves is to advise local election officials from over 500 municipalities in our state regarding election laws and procedures. And the Secretary of State does have an excellent website, and there is a lot of useful information about election and election laws and procedures on that website. So what are the roles of the local officials? So your municipal clerk is the supervisor of the election. The clerk's office administers absentee ballots, and I'm guessing that probably everyone in this room has voted already. Maybe not. Okay, good. Glad to hear that. They coordinate election officials to work at the polls, arrange for poll watchers, prepare and deliver to the polls equipment to vote and materials like the ballots, and then report the election results to the Secretary of State. I looked at the town of Yarmouth's website, and if you go to the town clerk's page, there is information about voter registration, absentee ballots, and as well as sample ballots, which I think voters can find very useful. Next slide. So there are local officials who assist the town clerk. Sometimes town clerks, I know I vote in Scarborough, my town clerk is almost always there on election day. I don't think they have to be, because they appoint these other local officials, and sometimes some of whom are appointed by the town council. I'm going to take these officials a little out of order, because I will talk a lot more about registration than some of the other duties that are performed by local officials. The warden is the person who's kind of in charge of the operations on election day at the polls. They are appointed by the municipal clerk, and they assist in all the duties on election day. Election clerks are appointed by the town council. I think these are the people who check you in when you come to vote. And they assist the warden, and there are supposed to be at least two, one from each major party. And I don't know, how difficult it may be in certain towns to find two, volunteers who they are paid, but still, it's a full day activity, and it involves
Melissa,
some responsibilities.
can I just mention one thing quickly?
Sure.
The League of Women Voters also organizes poll watchers throughout the state, and in the June election, they were able to have a poll watcher at every single site, I believe, and hopefully that's going to happen again this year. So if you go in and see volunteers there are some from the League that are there just to observe and make sure everything's being done.
I'm going through my training tomorrow night.
Oh, so you're going to be a poll watcher?
So I'll be a poll watcher. I'm not sure. I've done it before. I'm not sure if I'll be in Scarborough, or I was in Gorham in the June election.
You don't know where you're going yet.
I don't know where I'm going yet. Somewhere close by. But And often the parties will have we're there as nonpartisan observers, but often the parties will have observers as well, just to make sure that everything is going as planned. And we have a list of things that we're supposed to look for, how long are lines, are there backups, do you see anyone turned away, that sort of thing. So that brings me to my next point, which is the registrar. So every town has a registrar of voters too, and that person, as you might expect, administers voter registration. And the statute says they have exclusive power to determine if the applicant meets the requirements. That seems like a lot of authority to me. Now, to step back a little bit, however, if you meet the statutory requirements to register to vote, which are fairly limited in Maine, you have to be a citizen of the United States, obviously. You have to have established residence in the town where you are registering. And you can show that, by your lease, your tax bill, utility bills, your driver's license if it has the name, has your residence on it. And you must be at least 18 years of age. Now, if you meet those three requirements, you cannot be turned away from voting. And that is one of the things that we are always looking for. I have to say, I've observed, 2 or 3 elections. I've never seen anyone turned away. I have seen people be in the wrong polling place, but they are instructed where to go. So, I think we should be very proud of that. And if for some reason you don't meet the qualifications, you may still cast a ballot. It will just be a challenged ballot. And those are not looked at or counted unless they become determinative. So, but the important thing is that you can't be turned away, and if you think you're in the right place and they're telling you you're not, you may vote a challenged ballot.
Also, can I just add one
Sure.
thing? If you're in line by 8 o'clock on election night, then you will continue through until you have voted. So the cutoff will happen on the line at 8 o'clock, but I think we've all seen other states where people are in line for hours, and then they get sent home at 8 o'clock. That doesn't happen in Maine.
That does not happen here.
If you're in line, you get to vote regardless of the time by 8 o'clock, the cutoff.
As far as establishing residency, too, I think it's very important to know that in Maine, students have the right to register at their school address. So, for example, if somebody is a resident of another state but is attending a college here, state or private institution, and they can establish that they live at that place, even if it's a dorm room, they have the right to register in that municipality.
Can I mention one more thing, too?
Sure, yeah, please do.
One other thing the League has is we have a Maine Student Votes is one arm of the League of Women Voters, and they have been very active this fall in all the college campuses to hold voter registration drives and letting the students know that they can declare residency in Maine and vote locally, or encouraging them to vote absentee at their home state. So it's been very successful this year, reaching out to our student population.
And that's another point there, is that even though the town registrar is the official registrar, third-party groups, such as the League of Women Voters, may register people at events, or, you could come to our office if someone is there to register. We just have to have the registration cards into the town clerk's office, and I think it's 15 days before an election, so that they have time to update their roles. I mean, one of the most rewarding things I do with the League of Women Voters is attend naturalization ceremonies, which Peg organized for years. And, we are at the ceremonies, we have a table set up outside, and we accost people when they leave, asking them to register to vote. And I would say that the majority of them do. And so that's, you might think, well, as soon as you become a citizen, you're automatically registered. No, unfortunately, you're not. And we do sometimes have to explain that. And I will say the Naturalization Service is very good about saying, one of the first things you want to do is to register to vote. And there we are.
So it's
to help
also
them.
nice to be with a bunch of people that were very happy to be Americans.
Yes.
So it's always quite an exciting ceremony. If you've not had a chance to go and you get a chance, please do.
Yes,
it's very nice.
It is great. A few other things about registration. You may pre-register at the age of 16. And 17-year-olds may vote in a primary election if they are going to be 18 by the time of the general election. We also have some other voting rights. Incarcerated persons may vote at their previous address as long as they intend to return there when their time of incarceration is up. And homeless persons may also vote in Maine if they can. They have to file a form with their town and describe where they consider their home to be. I don't know how many people take advantage of that, but it is something that I would have to believe is pretty unique to Maine. We also have accessible voting. So one of the things I've noticed when I've been observing, and one of the things we're instructed to look for is there an accessible voting booth? And also certain people who have certain types of disabilities are allowed to get email sent to their homes where they can vote from home by email. And please don't ask me the details about that because I don't know them, other than I know that it is available. And I'm sure the town clerk or the registrar would be able to give more information about that.
And plus, you can bring anyone with you.
Oh, that's a very good point, yes.
If somebody has a disability, they can bring somebody in with them who can help them, whether it's eyesight or anything like that. And any age requirement, that person doesn't have to be 18 to join you.
So I think we're ready for the next slide. And please, if you have any questions at any time, don't hesitate to interrupt. So now we've gotten through kind of the boring nitty-gritty. Well, I wouldn't say it's boring. I'm sorry. The nitty-gritty of voting in the election processes in Maine. So I think one of the other things that we can be most proud of is our expansive list of voting rights, which again obviously contributes largely to voter turnout. I was very surprised to learn that we have had same-day voter registration for 50 years. That is pretty remarkable. My brother lives in Ohio. The registration date, cutoff date is October 7th. So that is pretty remarkable. It's never too late to register to vote in Maine, as long as you do it by 8 p.m. on election day in the proper place. So we've got a timeline here, and so it took us 23 years or so to get to the next important milestone, but that is the Clean Elections Act passing as a ballot measure. Again, I'm not an expert on clean elections, and you may be familiar with the rules, but candidates collect a specified number of $5 contributions from people in their district. They agree not to raise or spend any private money, and then they have to limit their spending on elections to the amount they've received from the Clean Elections Fund. And that is determined by how many $5 contributions you get. And I think it's an equal amount given to everyone.
So can I just
Sure.
tell a little story? I was surprised because a local candidate I wanted to support, which I had provided the $5 donation to, I wanted to send another donation in to support this candidate, and I could not because the limit is the $5 donation. And this candidate has been very happy with how Clean Elections allows them to be able to run on an equal basis. So.
And it goes without saying that it's much more popular, obviously.
So I think we're ready for the next,
or used much more frequently in local
please,
elections.
if you have any questions at any
for state legislature.
don't hesitate to.
We may have had a candidate or two for gubernatorial elections who have been clean elections candidates, but we're working on it. I believe the city of Portland now has a clean elections campaign as well. So apparently there was a clean elections, in 2011, there was a ballot, people's veto, saved the same-day voter registration. So I believe that the legislature repealed same-day legislation, and the League of Women Voters and others came forward with a ballot measure, and that the people vetoed that repeal of same-day registration. And there was something fixed with clean elections. I have to confess, I don't know what that is. Now, this is a big one. In 2016, ranked choice voting was passed by ballot. And we're going to have, on a couple of these, we're going to have a couple very, very short videos to play for you. So you won't have to listen to me the whole time. And one of those is about ranked choice voting. But I'm sure you're probably all aware that we cannot use ranked choice voting for the gubernatorial election because of that pesky state constitution, which apparently says that the governor should be elected by a plurality, not by a majority vote. So you may, coming to an election, you will participate in the future, perhaps, will be an proposed amendment to the state constitution to allow us to use ranked choice voting for the gubernatorial election. But we are allowed to use it for the President of the United States and for our federal candidates. Also, we have passed automatic voter registration, and there's some people say, well, you shouldn't really call it automatic, it's automated. But it will have a little video on this too, but that is going to, your registration can be conducted or updated at the motor vehicle anytime you go to update your license, for example. Next slide, we're up to 2021.
The ranked choice voting passed legislation in 2020.
Yes, that's for the presidency, right? So now we do have online voter registration that passed in 2021, as well as the ability to track your absentee ballots and making drop boxes permanent. We're going to talk about some threats to this in a minute. But online voter registration, I will tell you that I have used it at some voter registration drives at schools. And as long as the challenge has always been whether the internet connection is working. That's the downside of it. But, I know someone who lives in an assisted living facility who needed to change her address. And I said, well, you know what? I said, I'll be glad to bring you a voter registration card to do that. But you can also just do it online. And I think she did.
And it also allows people to check their voter registration and make sure it's all intact in time for the election.
So that is pretty useful. In 2022, ongoing absentee voting for people 65 and older has passed. Now, I will tell you that you do have to apply for that, which I didn't realize. I was like, oh, why am I not automatically getting this? You have to apply, and there's a form on the Secretary of State's website. And once you do that, you will automatically get an absentee ballot sent to you. You won't have to request it every single time. Semi-open primaries also passed, and that was really interesting. That was one of the things I observed when I was doing observation in June of this year. It was seamless. I mean, everybody knew that, okay, I'm an independent, but I can vote in one primary or the other, and people came in, and it was administered flawlessly. I'm sure you understand this, but basically what it means is that an unenrolled voter, somebody who's not a member of the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, can vote in either the Democratic or the Republican primary, but not both. And so approximately 30% of voters who had been essentially disenfranchised from voting in primaries are now able to vote in one or the other if they'd like to, without having to change their status as unenrolled voters.
Right, I was going to ask how many people have gone from independent to a party in order to be able to vote in the primary in years past.
Yeah.
That's a lot of extra work for the clerks, so this is so much easier.
Let's see. We talked about automatic voter registration. has been implemented now. And like I said, we'll have a little video on that. And now, in 2023, ongoing absentee voting for everyone, not just those 65 and older, has passed. Similarly, to qualify, one must file an application. And the Secretary of State's office, finally, we had funding secured from the legislature to implement all of these things. So most recently, in 2024, you may have read that the legislator voted and the governor signed the bill for Maine to join the National Popular Vote Compact. And we can talk about that more if you'd like to. Again, I think that's a subject of a lot of conversation. Essentially, if states totaling 270 electoral votes agree to this, then we hope this compact will spring into action to say that the national popular vote should now govern the winner of the presidential election. Now, we know that this will be challenged in court. So some would say, why did you do this? It's symbolic. Well, yes, it is symbolic, and that's why we did it. So it's important. And we'll see what the effect of that may be.
And that would affect Maine along with one other state, because we're the only ones that split our electoral votes. And so under the national popular vote, both of our electoral votes would go to the winner of the popular vote, of the composite of all the states.
Oh, I thought,
I'm sorry?
well, I thought it meant that in national popular vote, so it's not every state whoever wins in that state.
No, it's my understanding that of all the states that sign on to the compact, they take a look at the
Who wins the
popular
most
vote
votes
of all
overall.
right. So
And then that state's
that block of states' electoral votes will go
Gotcha.
to the winner of the popular vote.
Gotcha.
Oh, thank you.
So it kind of bypasses the requirement for the electoral college.
Yeah. Well, it's not totally symbolic in that it's done because nobody will introduce the amendment to do
Correct.
this by amendment. So if it did pass and people started implementing and somebody challenged it in court, it could potentially.
It could potentially be the law.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. It could be more than symbolic. And we hope that it is. Also in this year, online voter registration, as I mentioned, has been implemented, and I've used it, not for myself, but for people that I'm registering and helping people change their addresses. Ongoing absentee voting for 65 plus has now been implemented if you make the application. Semi-open primaries, obviously we did that in June, and now ranked choice voting for president. And those of you who voted, I'm sure you'll see your ballots do include the option to do ranked choice voting for president.
And House and Senate.
And House and Senate, right. So I think at this point we will play a few videos, some of which will repeat what I've said but are slightly more entertaining, I hope.
And I believe all three videos were put together by our Maine Student Votes contingency.
Hopefully, by now, you've requested your absentee ballot. It's arrived in the mail, and you're ready to fill it out. Don't worry, this is not confetti. This is just to protect the privacy of the address. So, let's talk about how to complete your ballot. Your ballot may come with instructions that are specific to your town. It's also possible that your town clerk did not provide instructions at all. You'll need something to fill in those bubbles on the ballot. What looks like a good choice? A black pen? Perfect! Or a blue pen. Technically, the ballot is for your eyes only, so beware of anyone trying to take a peek. Double check to make sure you've received all the correct ballots. If you've received an incorrect one, you'll need to contact your town clerk. The first thing you should do before even filling out a ballot is to sign your name. It's on the back of the return envelope. All Maine voters will have the chance to vote on questions 1 and 2. If you need help deciding whether to vote yes or no, check out Vote 411 for a nonpartisan guide. Use your pen to fill in the bubbles as you normally would. Mainers will also vote using ranked choice voting in the Senate and House races. It's easy. Simply rate the candidates in order of your preference. If you are totally certain of your top choice, you don't have to vote for a second or third choice. Ranking your choices is optional. Here's a sample ballot using ranked choice voting. This is just an example of how to fill in the bubbles. If someone helped you fill out your ballot, they will also need to sign the back of the envelope. Place all of your ballots into the return envelope. Then you'll apply postage, seal it, and mail it off. You can also return it directly to your town clerk. Don't forget that stamp. Ballots must be received by 8 p.m. on Election Day. Don't be late. For more information, visit our website. Have questions? Get in touch with us. We're here to help.
Obviously, that was from a previous election. There's some of the things that are not quite accurate this time, but the general idea is the same. And now, I know my town, and probably yours does too, has a ballot box right outside the town office, which is where I slipped mine in.
Yeah, I did too.
Yeah.
I'd like to deliver it in person.
Yeah, I assumed that you probably did. Okay, next I think, what's the next one? Ranked choice voting? This is a little more specific about ranked choice voting. Absentee or otherwise.
America is changing, and that change should reflect our needs. Maine's ranked choice voting system allows us to have more influence in our elections. When you go to vote, you rank all the candidates in order of your preference. If no candidate wins an outright majority of top preference votes, then the candidate with the least number of those votes is eliminated. The people who voted for that candidate will have their second preference votes counted. This continues until one candidate wins the majority. Ranked choice voting means your vote counts, even if your preferred candidate doesn't win. To learn more about ranked choice voting and find your nearest polling place, go to vote411.org/Maine.
I think, Peg, you had an example of encouraging someone to use ranked choice voting, right? Someone who wanted to make a protest vote, for example.
My niece, yes.
Yes.
She wanted to make a protest vote, and I emailed her and reminded her she could still do that. But then the person that would be this was for president, the person who would be most likely, one of the major candidates, she should really put down as her second choice, because ranked choice voting allows you to support a candidate who may not actually have as much a chance to win the election. And it even works for local government, that you could request, oh no, because that's state, isn't it? Yeah, so you can still vote for the candidate even though they may not win. And I think that's especially important for candidates that are trying to find out how popular they are throughout the state. They could still get a large number of votes, whereas before ranked choice voting, it was an either or, and now you can actually vote for the person you'd like to support and then put your second choice, in case they don't win, who you would want to put your support behind.
So what you said about your niece, I would only encourage a protest vote in a state with ranked choice voting. Because in a close election, those protest votes can throw the election.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And because it's an either or.
Right.
Yeah.
And also, I believe that the city of Portland uses ranked choice voting, and I believe the city of Westbrook does as well. And I think that there is a movement afoot to potentially, in Lewiston, to potentially use ranked choice voting as well.
Do you know how many other states use
I know Alaska is very strong.
Yeah,
Right.
Alaska does use it. I believe that may be the only one.
There was one state, I know there's been some place, and I think it was a state at the federal level, but maybe it was at the state level, that had it and repealed it.
Yeah, that may be true.
I can't remember where.
Alaska does use it
Yeah.
now. We
And I
know
think
that.
more states have been interested. Maine is considered a leader in ranked choice voting, and so quite often we get questions and information about it. And I think there may be national groups that talk about ranked choice voting. And what I like to say to my friends is I want my elected officials to win by at least 50% of the votes. Ranked choice voting allows that, to know that the majority of the people are supporting this candidate to be in office, where Maine has had a lot of candidates previous to ranked choice voting that did not have 50% of the votes, and I think it's a good way to keep everything more level, I guess.
Next, I think we've got one more video about the automatic voter registration.
Did you know that it's easier than ever to register to vote in Maine? When you go to the BMV to get, renew, or update your driver's license, you will automatically be registered to vote. They can also update or change your voter registration information. If you are under the age of 18 and are getting your license, you can even pre-register. To learn more, go to www.maine.gov.
I think the automatic voter registration is particularly helpful in cases where you are changing your address. And you just, when you go to change your driver's license, your voter registration changes at the same time. I think that's it for the videos.
Right, so go back. Nope.
There we go. Thank you.
Thank
so
you.
This is the status of voting rights in Maine now. So what is next? Believe it or not, there is a study going on about voting at age 16, and that may sound crazy to you, but I know that Peg has been involved in the study, so I will let her speak to that.
Yes, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about it, because this is one of the things that the League does, is we don't make a policy decision unless we've studied it. And I've participated in 2 or 3 of them, and it's a really interesting experience. Each local league has a group that meets 2 or 3 times and discusses the questions that are put together for the league study. Then a composite statewide of all the 5 leagues is put together to help determine what that policy is. And with the ranked choice, the age 16, just about everybody that was involved with it said, nah, that'll never pass, so it won't make any difference. This is the list of the studies that the league has done, and the voting age study was done last year. And at the end of it, everybody came through the process of studying all the resources that are in the background, all the way other countries are doing 16-year-olds, and determined that that there was real value in allowing 16-year-olds to participate, whether it's just locally, which is a possibility just in a city or a town for local elections, or if it's statewide. And part of the reasons behind it is that if the earliest that people vote, the more inclined they are to vote later on in their lives. So if they can vote at 16, they'll be more inclined to vote at 18. When kids graduate from school, at 18, they're maybe starting their first big job, or else they're away at college and they've got lots of other things coming at them, whereas when they're 16, they're in an environment that cultivates conversation around government and around issues going on. So,
And it could become a part of the high school curriculum, right?
yes. So I would encourage you to take a look at the voting age study, or some of the other studies that the leagues have done. I've always been impressed with the amount of research that goes into it and the conversations that happen around it.
One of the other things we're studying right now, which please don't ask me to explain it, is proportional ranked choice voting. So we're never happy with our successes. We want to try to expand and improve them. Another thing that we will be working on in the coming year, or the next calendar year, is a State Voting Rights Act. As you can see, we have a very expansive list of voting rights right now, but they're under constant threat. If you saw the list of the timeline that we went through, same-day voter registration was repealed by the legislature, and we had to mobilize and get people's veto of that. And you probably also know that the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled in favor of challenges to certain parts of the National Voting Rights Act, which have been in effect for years. And so states are stepping in to fill the void because we don't expect that to be fixed, sad to say, at the national level. So one of the things that we will be working on, and we're not sure which aspects to focus on yet, will be a state voting rights act to pass in Maine. And also, I hesitated to put down voter suppression ballot initiative because that clearly shows how I think about it. But it is, but let's call a spade a spade. It is styled as a voter ID law. And, you know, a lot of people will say, well, what's wrong with making people show an ID to vote? Right now, an ID is only required to register. Once you're registered, you don't have to show an ID when you go to vote. The new law that's being proposed by this ballot initiative would require that you present an ID when you go to vote. It would prohibit the use of tribal ID cards, student IDs, expired driver's licenses, and expired passports. So, you know, what if your wallet gets stolen the day before the election? I mean, that's an extreme example, but it's so, you know, everyone says, well, I don't think there's anything wrong with requiring ID. Well, maybe, but this goes beyond just requiring an ID to vote. Also, it's been shown that voter ID laws disproportionately harm seniors, people with disabilities, and students. And I personally think it's probably aimed toward keeping students from voting. Again, don't quote me on that.
That's let you use tribal IDs. That, I mean, that's just speaks volumes.
Oh, yes, it does. It does. No student ID, no tribal ID.
Yeah.
That's all you need to say right there. It also, and it goes beyond just requiring voter IDs to vote. It would affect absentee ballot requests, adding layers of complication and requests, would not allow informal requests in the small towns where everybody knows everyone. You'd have to go through and make an actual formal application, no email to your town clerk, no stopping in your town clerk's office. Would prevent nonprofit organizations or family friends from returning people's votes, absentee ballots. And would allow anyone, not just election officials, to challenge an absentee ballot. And it would repeal ongoing absentee ballot voting, which we've just talked about how proud we are that we have that. And it would limit drop boxes. Another example is, for example, like in the town of Orono, you know, that would allow drop boxes, but would have to be in the town clerk's office. Well, what about all the students at the University of Maine? So those are the, you know, just I would encourage you to learn more about this ballot initiative. And believe me, there will be plenty of letters to the editor and more information coming out.
And this isn't new, requiring voter ID. It has come before the legislature for multiple
times.
years.
It doesn't pass.
Every year, the league researches it, takes a look at it, and determines it's not in the best interest. And as the article in the paper today said, 900 people are the most. In many of the small towns in Maine, people know each other.
So what can you do? What can you take away from today? The expansion and protection of voting rights, as we've said, don't happen on their own or by accident. And now I have to give a shameless plug for the League of Women Voters. We're always doing advocacy and educational work around the state. And as Peg said, we are nonpartisan, we're grassroots. We encourage informed and active participation in government, increase understanding of major public policy issues, and we influence public policy through education and advocacy after we've studied it. We never support or oppose any political candidate or party, and membership is open to anyone over 16. So I'd encourage you to look at our website, and to follow up on any of the information that we've presented today. I hope you've learned something. I know that a lot of it is probably preaching to the choir, but I think that, I certainly learned things when I was preparing for this conversation today?
So there's, of the 3 website addresses that are on there, or addresses that are on the league site, lwvme.org. If you take a look at it, it has multiple tabs, just a wealth of information. So I would encourage you to take a look there. Vote 411 is an online voter guide. Our paper voter guide is outside the door. You're welcome to take copies of it. But the online voter guide is statewide. It's also national. It's a national database from the League of Women Voters. So all the states throughout the country utilize it locally, and it has a lot of information on it. And then email, if you come up with questions at a later time, please email us at portland@lwvme.org, which comes directly to me, so I'm glad to answer your questions.
We'd like to thank you for coming or watching this video.
Any questions?
I've got one. So when you were running down all of the different updates to voting system and voting rights from 1976 until now, I mean, that's just one single lifetime of a voter, not a very long period of time. Why is it that so much has been updated in that one voter's lifetime? Why is it now that we're seeing this? Is it in response to challenges, or is it a result of technology developing more? Because a lot of those updates to voting seem like common sense. It just seems like when you are going to update your state ID, that would just be the time that your voter registration would also be updated.
Well, that's definitely technology.
Okay, because that's just facilitating.
Because now the Department of Motor Vehicles is tied in directly with your local town clerks, and so that information from your license gets fed into the voter registration unless you opt out. So that's the technology which wasn't in place until this year, I believe, because previous to that, when you went to the Department of Motor Vehicles, you could request to have your information passed manually to your local town clerk, and now it's automated. So I would say, yes, technology is a big piece of it.
It is a big piece of it, and this is just my personal opinion, so please take it with a grain of salt. But, I mean, look at it. We didn't have a National Voting Rights Act until 1960s. So there has been this, until then, and even today, there have been systematic attempts to suppress people's votes. So we're lucky to live in a state where we've resisted that. And as I said, it's not by accident. We have, very good policymakers, legislators who are responsive to what the people of the state want. And it's very sad that it varies from state to state. Like I said, I know people who live in states where they can't register to vote within a month of the election. I mean, and so you can't tell me that's not intended to suppress voters. I'm sorry, but that's common sense. And it's, I have to admit, I was indoctrinated at an early age, but I remember my parents talking about, how difficult it was made for people to vote. In some states, the polls closed at 6 o'clock.
Each state is different. You had a question?
Oh, I was just going to say a friend of mine was doing an absentee ballot to Arizona, and she can't request it online. She has to call. I mean, in a certain time period, she has to call and request it. And she can't even follow up to see if it's been sent, right, or received. Every one of those is in a phone call. I just couldn't believe that.
Right, and we've heard about changes to Georgia's election laws. I guess that's how to answer your question. Why has it happened in the past 50 years in Maine in particular? We've just been fortunate to have educated and informed participants in our local government.
And I would also encourage anyone who has questions to reach out to your town clerks. They are wonderful. You should get to know who your town clerks are. And they will answer any and every question. I usually try to tell people when they've got set ideas about our elections to go talk to the town clerks. And when we were talking about automatic voter registration for those over 65, this is the first year. So I called my town clerk to find out, just because I'd filled out the form last year, if that was going to be coming. And she said, oh yeah, I've got it right here on my desk. That's going out in the mail. So it's good to do.
Yeah, my question is about mail-in ballots. I'm very, very old-fashioned. I will be voting in person. Although I did have pause about that, because a friend who was at my house the other night voted for the first time with an absentee ballot, but she took it to the clerk's office.
Mm-hmm. You can vote in person at the clerk's office.
Yes, so as opposed to mailing it or putting it in the drop box. And the clerk said, you can't vote, you've been dropped from the rolls. And she said, what? And then it turned out there was someone else with a very similar name who had moved out of state and so had terminated theirs. And the clerk was able to straighten it out.
Mm-hmm.
But she said, I'm glad I didn't put it in the drop box, and that showed up on
Right.
Yeah, and then I was, well, like, if it had happened when you were in person at the polls, maybe if it was early in the day, it would have been handled, but if it was the end of the day, what would have happened? So I don't know what happens when those kinds of things, if something like that should happen when you went to vote.
Well, there is same-day registration, so she would have been able to register if she'd gone to the polls and found that out. And so she would have been able to register and vote that day. Now, if
Then she would have been registered twice, because it turned out that she
wasn't. Yes, so hopefully that would have been straightened out. And there is also this process for the challenge ballot, although if she went to register to vote, if they should have been able to update her registration if in fact it had been dropped, which it sounds like it hadn't. But so there are a lot of procedures in place, but you're right, if she'd put it in a Dropbox. Now I think sometimes they'll call you. If you live in a town where they know you or they can find you, they'll call you and say, oh, you got a mistake on your ballot here. Would you like another one? That's another great thing about living in a small town in Maine.
So I had a call this week from someone who had received an absentee ballot in the mail and lost it, couldn't find it. And so what I encouraged her to do was to go talk to her town clerk. She can get a new ballot, fill it out at the town clerk's office, and what they do is they will only process the first ballot that comes in. So worst case scenario, say she lost the ballot or somebody picked it up and planned to vote in her place. This way she will have put the first ballot in and make sure that that's the one that counted. So.
But then my other question had to do with the mails, because I don't know about your town,
Right.
but here in Yarmouth, the mail service is terrible.
Right, I would not
And
rely on that.
because of that, and there was a lot of trouble in the last election nationwide because of that. And what are the rules in place now if someone mails in their absentee ballot, and it's probably less likely to happen here because of all the structure, but you mail in an absentee ballot, say you're mailing it from California to vote in Maine, when does it have to be here by? If it's mailed before Election Day?
Oh, that's a good question. I have to admit I don't know the answer to that. I'm guessing that it probably has to be received by 8 p.m. on Election Day.
And God, who can determine that?
Right, yeah. No, the mail is a challenge.
Yeah.
We also in Maine now have a way for you to go online and check your voter registration and find out if your ballot has been received. So I would certainly encourage anyone who's mailing in an absentee ballot to be able to reach out to their town clerk directly to make sure they got it.
Yeah, my son voted from England in Georgia, and but he could check online and see that his ballot had been received.
Right.
Good.
Any more questions?
Oh, they said in unison. Well, again, thank you very much for coming, and thank you for watching the video, and please vote if you haven't already.
And reach out for
you.
questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.